Welcome back, Science 10. This is the second part on 3.2, International Collaboration on Climate Change. So we looked at the initial part of the Kyoto Protocol, looking and specifically Canada reducing CO2 emissions below 1990 levels by the year 2010. And of course, we've surpassed that time period. So let's take a look at what was originally looked at. So Kyoto Protocol, an international agreement to reduce production. So we looked at that. Canada must reduce, etc. Key feature of the Kyoto Protocol is a concept called emission reduction credits. So you don't have to reduce your amount as much if you can do the following. So credits given to the countries for actions that contribute to the global reduction of greenhouse gas. So what you're doing in your own country, plus what are you doing to help other countries. The ERCs, or emission reduction credits, are not a reduction in the emissions of that country. ERCs are awarded for the following actions. So when a developed country helps a developing country to reduce its emissions, when a developed country helps another developed country that has a temporary economic problem to reduce its emissions, for example, developed countries recovering from major war or natural disaster might qualify, or when a country engages in practices that help to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, such as planting trees to reforest a logged area. Okay, so credits that your country could earn if you help not only locally but globally. The emission reduction credit system allows some flexibility in how nations meet their goals, and so allows them to more easily make sustainable changes. However, of course, some people see this, the ERCs, these credits, as a particular way for richer nations to avoid having to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases they emit. Okay, because they're in a more position in which they can do that. Economics in the Kyoto Protocol. The Kyoto Protocol involves a process of signing a treaty. So first of all, countries must sign to agree to do it, followed by acceptance by voters of those countries. Many developed regions such as Canada, United States, and the European Union signed the treaty and agreed to do it. And Canada ratified the Kyoto Protocol in 2002. Ratify means voting and accepting it, but other countries had yet to ratify it. The United States indicated in the spring of 2001 that they may withdraw from the protocol entirely for economic reasons. China also signed the treaty but did not ratify or vote on it, and India did not sign it either. So notice I'm speaking in the past tense here because this has already happened. These two less developed countries are experiencing many changes in economic growth that more developed nations had experienced earlier in history. This economic growth, of course, is linked to increased production of greenhouse gases. Figure D 3.19 shows the greenhouse gas emissions by nations in 1998, for example. So you can see the largest contributors are the green areas. So here, here, here. Second largest, of course, is the blue area, etc. Some developed nations have decided not to participate in the protocol until other good developing countries have signed. So it's a catch-22. Some countries won't want to sign until other countries sign, but likely those countries are waiting for them to sign, etc. Some of these countries have stated that they will not sign until more developed countries reduce their reduce their greenhouse gas emissions first. So, for example, everyone might be looking towards the United States. Well, you're producing the most. We're waiting for you to vote on it, and then we'll do it. Because why should we do it first before you? So you can see how international politics becomes a factor in all of this. Stabilizing greenhouse gas levels. Stabilizing the levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere depends on achieving a balance between reducing the emissions and increasing the rate of their removal, as we've seen earlier. For example, levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide are increased by emissions from sources of cars, industries, and decreased when plants photosynthesize or when carbon dioxide dissolves in oceans. Scientists and inventors are therefore also looking at new ways of removing. So what are ways we can remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere? One idea that some oil and gas companies are using is called carbon dioxide sequestering. In one version, carbon dioxide is pumped into the ground to help extract underground oil reserves. Once the oil is removed, the gas is then sealed in that empty space underground. Research is also continuing to find other methods of sequestering greenhouse gases. So this is a really interesting idea, and believe it or not, this idea is coming to be in Weyburn. So if over here, using driving gas and water, CO2 water, to push out oil, and that added pressure will force that oil up and make it easy to extract. So that's kind of a very simplified view of what's going on there. Okay, and then once the oil is extracted, seal this area, the CO2 stays underneath. So it's a way of forcing CO2 out of the atmosphere and basically holding it underground. Okay, so finally here, we can all contribute to this process in our personal choices. For example, you might choose to ride a bike instead of mass transit or walk to school to cut down the use of a car. You could also plant trees in your neighborhood. Many industries in Canada are also acting to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases they contribute. For example, the pulp and paper industry reduced its carbon dioxide emission from 1990 to 1995 by 20%. That's a fairly large amount. By using wood waste, something that they produce naturally in the pulp and paper industry, using wood waste as fuel to heat their facilities rather than fossil fuel, oil and gas. So this change has also had an economic benefit for the industry since they no longer had to buy as much heating fuel. They're just simply using the waste. So a way of recycling their waste not only saves them money, but also reduce the amount of greenhouse gases being made. All right, questions I'd like you to do for this section, folks. So on a piece of loose leaf, just write 3.2 International Collaboration on Climate Change. So number one, describe, and yes again folks, you're welcome. I kind of alluded to what page you can find the answers on. So number one, describe the GCM climate model that scientists use to study climate change. So that's on page 419. Explain why research on climate change requires international collaboration. Again, page 419. In one or two sentences, what is the purpose of the Montreal Protocol? Page 421. What are CFCs and what are they used for? Or where are they used for? Page 421. Explain why the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change was an important step in international action on climate change. 421. What is the Kyoto Protocol? Page 422. 7. Explain what emission reduction credits are and give an example of how they might be used in Canada. Page 422. 8. Describe two personal choices you could make to reduce your contribution to greenhouse gas emissions. So that's kind of an opinion question. What are some, after looking at what we've done so far, what are a couple of things you could do to reduce your contribution? Number 9 was carbon dioxide sequestering. So that was the last thing we talked about, page 424. We'll skip 10 and 11, but number 12, give an example of how an industry in Canada could reduce its contribution to greenhouse gas emissions. Page 425. Hint, hint, you could talk about the pulp and paper industry. And 13, what were some of the problems in implementing the Kyoto Protocol? So page 424. In the next assignment after this one, there will be a question on you looking up what is the status of this Kyoto Protocol right now. So, because of course the text I'm using here is older, and of course we've surpassed the 2012 point. Where is the status of this now? So we'll be looking at that in the next assignment. All right, so there we have it, folks. We'll see you again.